Welcome back everybody to linuxacademy.com. My name is Terry, and in today's course we continue our preparation for the Linux Foundation Certified System Administration exam. This is part 2 for our video on transferring files securely via the network in our Network File Systems and File Services section. In our previous video, we talked about one way to do it, which was using the built-in SSHD or OpenSSH server in order to use a secure copy to do command line copies between file systems, local and remote. We can pull or push files between them using user credentials that are set up. We did mention briefly that you've probably used FTP for file transfer. In fact, FTP stands for File Transfer Protocol. It was what was in heavy use in the earlier parts of the internet before security became of paramount concern, particularly as services became more universally available through the internet and more public. As a result, FTP, because of its insecurity and relative ease of hacking and exploiting, is not in heavy use for internet file transfers any longer. In fact, you'll mostly use SCP, but you can use an FTP-like protocol called Secure FTP. And again, fortunately, Secure FTP relies on the OpenSSH server and uses as its underlying connection protocol all the encryption that goes along with SSHD. So by default, once you have OpenSSH server installed, SFTP is available for you to use within your system. And it does give you a little bit of flexibility that SCP doesn't. SCP, for example, doesn't allow you to pull a list of files in a particular directory so that you can see what you might want to copy, whereas using FTP or SFTP, you can explore the directories as long as you have the appropriate permissions to them using the user that you log into. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility in terms of being able to manage your file system than just a remote copy like Secure Copy does. So let's take a quick look at the configuration, and like we talked about, by default in the SSHD configuration, SFTP is available to you. And for SSHD, you need to go to etc SSH, and then there is a configuration file called SSHD config. And what we'll be looking for is the mention of the SFTP server. And you'll see that this subsystem, userlib OpenSSH SFTP server, is available. If you want to disable it, all you have to do is comment out this line and restart your OpenSSH server. So it's good that you know that you can disable SFTP, particularly because SSH has had an issue or two in the past where encryption has been compromised, and you may want to turn off services that you don't absolutely have to have available. That won't keep SCP from working. It just disables the SFTP service. So now that we know where that is, what might we want to do for it, and how does that differ from SSH Secure Copy? Well, as we talked about and did in our last video, we've got a transfer and a receive directory. So let's go ahead and we'll go into the receive directory. And we don't have anything in this, so what we're going to do is we're going to connect to our second server using SFTP. And that SFTP is done with SFTP and then the user at the IP address that you want to connect to. So in our case, 52.5.99.114, and that will allow us to log in, again, with the SSH password for that user. So keep in mind that it has to have you need to know the password of the user that is provisioned on the secondary server. So you have to know that password, or you have to have established an SSH key exchange, which we'll go over in a subsequent video, so that you don't need to log in with a particular password if it happens to be the user that you've exchanged keys with. So unlike SCP, where I had to know the name of the file that I would like, I'm logged into the remote directory and I can execute directory-like commands here to look at file systems and directories that I have access to. In fact, I can do a PWD, which will tell me that I'm in the remote home user directory. And if I do an ls, it will tell me what I have available. I can even do an LSAL and get the statistics, the user and ownership of all of the files remotely. That's useful for very obvious reasons, because I may need to know that I need to go into the transfer directory, which I can do with the CD transfer, and then I just do an LSAL and it will tell me that there's nothing in that particular directory. And if I do a CD dot dot, I can go back, ls minus al, and I can figure out that anything that I want to grab from here, I know the name of. So if I want to get a file, I simply add the name of the file that I want to get, and I can either just hit enter here, which will transfer the name of that file and all of its contents to my local directory, whatever I'm logged into locally when I started the SFTP command, or I can give it a new name. So let's call this one VNC remote. So now it fetched the home user VNC how-to and copied it to VNC remote. Well, where am I? Well, if I quit out of here, I'm in the received directory. So my file was received in the VNC remote. Sometimes I may have started the command from a directory that I don't want to transfer a file to. So I may want to know, well, I want the VNC how-to to be in my transfer directory instead of my received directory. So if I do an LCD, which is a local change directory, to dot dot and then slash, and the directory I want to be in, which is transfer, then I know that I am in the local directory for home user transfer. Now if I do a get on VNC how-to, I can do a VNC new, and I know that I've transferred that file to my transfer directory, and I can see that it's VNC new here. So I've got the additional flexibility of being able to connect securely, to browse the contents of my remote directory structure, to move around between that directory structure and find out what I have access to. So once I've received the information that I need by browsing around on my file system, I can move the files between the two locations, either locally or remotely between any of the directories, as long as I know what I need to do and where I need to do it from. So again, if I'm executing CD or PWD or LS commands remotely, the system that I'm connected on will answer with typical file system commands. If I need to change directories locally, then I need to do an LCD, because it would do a local change of directories. But all of this is happening within the OpenSSH server, so that those files are transferred securely between those locations using the SSH credentials, username, and password that I've previously established between these servers. So SFTP is enabled by default. It's on in the SSHD configuration file that we looked at. You can comment that out. But it's an alternative with a little bit more flexibility to allowing you to transfer files securely between networked file systems. So for secure network file transfer, that's all there is to it. My name is Terry for Linux Academy.